now we have a list of users that we are fetching from the remote server. We're copying it in a local array, right? And we are iterating over it and then rendering them. So how about if I want to remove them, right? Remove any one of these. So what we could do is that when we're generating the list, and then before we append it to the user list, what we could do is implement perhaps a delete button, right? So let's do that. Let's implement a delete button. So here's our delete button, and this is delete button, and this will be delete. And when we're going to bind this, we'll say delete button. If we click it, we're going to pass. We're going to call a function called delete user, and we're going to pass it the current index of the user, right? That we are. Well, actually, no. We could do what? We could pass it the ID already. We could pass it the ID. It would be users dot. What's better? We'll pass the ID. Let's see. We'll pass the ID. Right. So this delete user doesn't exist. Let's implement it somewhere over here. Maybe up here. Yes.
We need to do user brace
User. Oh, I'm sorry. Just user. Sorry. Yeah, just user. Right. The actual user, and we're passing the ID. So here the function would be function delete, takes as argument the user ID, and we can function delete user function. What are you complaining about? And we do console log user ID. What function delete? Oh, delete user. Delete all by itself is a keyword, right? So careful. So delete user. So delete user, and so let's try it out. We never appended the delete button, right? So we have the delete button. Let's append it to the li. So we can say li. We're going to append the delete button. There's a delete button. So if I click on Alice, notice that we have the ID of Alice. There it is. Or the delete of Ed, Dan, Bob. Make sense? Everybody good? All right, excellent. Actually, I'm thinking that it would be better if we pass the index. The reason I should pass the index instead is that locally, I want to splice the array. Yes? But remotely, I want to remove it by ID. Make sense? But the index allows me to have both the index, and then with the index, I can find the user and get the ID. Yes? So I'm going to pass the index instead. So I'm going to pass the index. The index is u. And so here's the index. I can then retrieve the user. The actual user is users subindex, and the user ID is just user dot underscore ID. Yes, right.
So regarding the homework, the way that you're doing the li.append,
yeah,
like, we would have like
a table.
.append.
Right, it would be a row. It would be a row.
Would you do a bunch of like td.appends, or would you do it in the backtick thing? Follow up.
Neither.
Neither.
So what I would do is instead is that I would create a template tr, right, in the HTML. I would give it an ID, and then from jQuery I can grab that tr, right, and then I would clone it, and then I can clone and paste it back into the table body and just append, right, and so what that allows me to do is that instead of having really complex, creation of HTML in JavaScript, it allows me to stay in HTML, and I can add classes, I can make it pretty, I can make it all sorts of things, and that allows me to stay in HTML and do HTML things.
How does it stay hidden the first time if we have nothing?
You could say display none, so it's not showing the very first time. Once you clone it and you have it in memory, it's okay to throw it away, right? But you would still keep a reference to that in memory. But that I'll leave to you. If you want to prefer, if you want to try and do it with tick, that's fine. If you want to do append, that's fine as well. That I'll leave to you. All right, so we have the delete. Locally, I can because I have the index. I could just splice out that user, right? I could just say users.splice at the index, comma 1, and then I can just re-render the users, right? Render users, right? So if I have if I refresh, if I click on add, notice that indeed it works locally, but if I refresh, I still have the same information. I need to tell the server. I need to make sure my array, my local array, is in sync with the remote array. Make sense? Right? So let's do that. Let's instead of just doing our splice here, let's tell the server that we want to remove a particular user, and we're going to pass the ID of the user we want to remove. Here it is. Delete user takes the user ID. We're going to do a same thing. Return fetch. Right. We're going to do a self URL. Same thing. Okay. But I need to if you remember, the delete user takes the URL and at the end appends the ID of the element that I want to remove, right? The unique identifier. So I need to append the user ID. I can do it the old-fashioned way, user ID, or preferably I would use the backticks. Backtick. This is an expression, right? I don't have to do concatenation. Right, and I would use backticks that way. Yes, that's preferable. And notice that fetch by default uses a get, right? Does an HTTP get, but we don't want to get here. We want to do a delete. Right? We want to send a delete. So to do that, we need to override, and we need to configure the fetch a little further, right? And we configure it with an optional JSON object, right? We can say that the method is not get, instead it's delete. Everybody good? All right, so let's try it out. Let's we have that delete. We're going to try it out over here. We're going to say I'm going to use user service dot delete user. I'm going to pass the user ID. I'm going to pass the user ID. It's going to return a promise, so I can do a then here. All right, here's the response. I don't really care about the response at this point. The response might be usually the response from this request is how many records have I removed. Typically, if it's since it's a primary key, it's always going to be one record that I've removed. But it might be that it times out, or you pass me the wrong ID and it doesn't find that particular one, so it would come back with 0, saying no, I didn't find a user with that ID. Right. So I would do some validation here, making sure that the response is 1. I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to ignore the response. What I am going to do is now that I came back from the server and I got a response, now I can actually do the splice. Right? Typically, I would only do the splice, if it was successful, if the status is 200, if indeed I was able to remove it on the server. Right? If I get some kind of error, then I would not remove it from my local array, right? Because I always want to make sure that they're in sync. Everybody good? You're still with me? All right, excellent. Let's see if it works. If I go back and refresh, right? Let's remove Alice. Right, let's refresh and see that Alice is indeed gone. Right, Bob. If I refresh, notice that Bob is indeed gone. Right, so I'm removing it from the remote server. Everybody good? Right, awesome.